Hey guys, it's on the line, and there's a lot going on out there. We have two guests today. PJ Fournier, 338.com, 338canada.com and 338canada.ca. Check them both out. They have different content at each. He's here to give us a quick federal polling update, why Matt Gurney is happy and Pierre Poilievre ain't. But more so, we're talking Quebec. And we're both saying things that are probably going to get us into trouble. We got a provincial election coming up. We may have a Quebec referendum coming up. We get into it. Stick around for that. It's going to be great. After that, my buddy Dave Shipley is here. He is going to both reassure me and then scare the living crap out of me about some AI stuff. He also has a warning for Albertans, and it's coming from Atlantic Canada via a Torontonian, so I know Albertans might not want to hear it, but it's a legitimate warning. Your referendum is a real ripe target for foreign interference. That and more. This is On the Line. This episode of On the Line is brought to you by BioCanRX. Can science help your immune system detect and destroy cancer? This summer, we're partnering with BioCanRX, a federally funded Canadian not-for-profit research network, to learn about cutting-edge cancer immunotherapy research that they're helping Canadian researchers bring from labs to patients in clinical trials, all in Canada. Immunotherapy is about assisting your immune system in identifying unhealthy cells, especially cancer, that have found a way to evade detection. One way researchers are doing this is through something called CAR-T. Basically, they draw your blood, isolate one type of your immune cells, the T cells, and use a virus to inject genetic instructions that causes them to grow new receptors designed specifically to bind with your particular cancer. Then those cells are re-infused into your body. When those cells are re-infused into your body, they hopefully will be able to find and destroy your cancer. The results are promising. In one of the 16 trials BioCanRX funds based on Canadian technology, CLIC-01, the median number of months remaining for patients with late-stage leukemia and lymphoma tripled. For some, the response was even bigger. They went from being out of options to cancer-free and have stayed that way for several years. But there are plenty of questions the researchers need to answer. How long does it last? How do we help those who have no response or only a short-lived one? How do we target other cancers? How do we scale this up and make it accessible to more Canadian patients? We'll explore more of these questions next time. Thanks again to BioCanRX for partnering with The Line this summer to share more insights into these new ways of fighting cancer. PJ Fournier from 338canada.com and 338canada.ca. He's one of my go-tos for polling analysis, not just the numbers, but the trends. He is talking with me today about Quebec. We do talk a little bit about federal politics at first, but mostly I'm interested in Quebec. We get into the upcoming provincial election. We get into the referendum. We get into one of the really interesting, almost unspeakable truths about Quebec politics, but we dare to speak it. So we're going to piss a lot of people off on that one, especially Quebec nationalists. They're not going to like me today. They usually don't. They're going to dislike me more than usual after this one. PJ joining me from Montreal. Here is my interview with him. PJ Fournier, always nice to have you here with me. I want to talk with you mostly about Quebec. And I find you this morning in Montreal, so great to see you. I was just teasing you a minute ago, too, because you're actually in a recording studio, and when you had an all-white background behind you, it looked like you were joining me from the afterlife.
I'm okay. I'm all good. It's all right. I'm here.
I was relieved when I realized it was just a white background. So let's talk about Quebec in a minute. But right now, a bunch of polls have come out in the last week or so federally, and they've been interesting. They've been a bit bumpy for the Liberals. I think they're all good news. Like, none of these polls have been bad news overall for Matt Gurney and the Liberals, but some of them have been really, really good news, and others have been not. And I'm trying to figure out if there's a trend here or if this is just a little bit of summertime bumpiness. What do you think?
Well, there's a lot of noise. You are correct about that, Matt. I would tell you this. Do you know the equation of happiness? Or the equation of le bonheur, as we say en français? It's expectations.
If I do, I forgot.
It's expectations minus reality, right? And so and so here's the thing. If you're looking at a poll and you haven't looked at polls in 6 months, you see the Liberals at 40 or 41%, 8 points in front of the Conservatives on average. You go like, oh my God, this is great. But the average was 45% just months ago. And then we had this Léger poll last week that other pollsters I talked to immediately called the outlier. It's just that it's kind of hard to put that label on Léger in the past decade. Léger has been right so many times, and so it's hard to just dismiss it. But Léger put the Liberals at 50% across the country, 16 points ahead of the Conservatives. So we have to be careful not to nitpick numbers. We look at trends, and right now the trends, there's some disagreement in the polls where the Liberals stand, but they stand on top regardless of who you're looking. The disagreement is also where the NDP is at, as it bounced back from its horrible 2 years, or is it just still near its floor? Where the polls do agree, the federal polls do agree, is where the Conservatives stand. Right now, if you look at 1 month of polling from several polling firms, the Conservatives are between 31 and 36 nationally, which it's an entirely reasonable bracket to be in when you look at all the landscape. So the Conservatives are not doing well, and the Liberals might be doing super well or just pretty well. So this is the landscape.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like when I see a Léger poll, I take it seriously, even if it is an outlier compared to the rest of the pack. Like they're not a fly-by-night company. They know what they're doing. So I took it seriously, but see, you're the numbers guy. I'm the politics guy. My impression of that was that I hadn't seen anything over the last 6 weeks that would explain a Liberal surge. Like, I don't think they've had a moment where everyone's like, man, Matt Gurney's killing it. And Pierre Poilievre, he also hasn't like face planted. He hasn't done anything particularly stupid lately. So when I see a bunch of polls showing kind of more that 8 to 10 point lead, that feels right to me. Like that's kind of where I think things are pointing. But hey, I don't know. Léger might be capturing something that just hasn't been captured by the others yet. If they are, I just don't know what it is.
Well, here's the thing, and I'll push back a bit on what you said, but it's semantics mostly. Léger has not seen a surge. If you look at previous Léger polls since January, it's steady as she goes. The last Léger poll had the Liberals at 48, and the Conservatives at 37. So if you look at just Léger polls since January, this is just within range. Right now, Léger has the Liberals higher than anybody else, and so an outlier would be a huge bump compared to previous polls from that firm, and this is not what we're seeing right now. And what is strange with these Léger numbers is that prior to the 2025 election, prior to last year, we would not have said that there's a house effect with Léger and the Liberals. I did those studies looking at house effect from polling firms, and Léger did not have a house effect for the Liberals, but it seems to have the Liberals higher since the last year's election. So this is something to look at. But again, maybe the Léger's panels is right, and the NDP is still in single digits, and the Liberals are far ahead on top.
I guess, we're not quite to mid-June yet. We're still in early June, but we will see the summertime kick in. Things will settle down. Maybe there'll be big breaking news or a scandal or something. That's always possible. But I'm thinking it'll be a pretty quiet summer in Canadian politics. Like that's where I think everybody right now, all the parties, as I can tell, they kind of want to retreat a little bit. They want to regroup and they want to rest. I don't think anyone's planning anything this summer. Now, events might force something. I know that. But I guess, if you're Matt Gurney and you're heading toward the summer and you're hoping for a calm one, not a bad place for you to be. If you're the Conservatives, you've got some hard questions you need to spend the summer trying to answer for yourself, because they're right back. You said it really well. They're right back kind of to where their historical average is. All of the gains Pierre Poilievre had been making since 2022 are gone. The Conservatives are right back to their median. Yeah,
absolutely. Be careful when you say you expect a slow summer. The equation of happiness is reality minus expectation. So you are correct, though, about the Conservatives. And I think the next 5 to 6 months will be a huge test for them. Not just for Mark Carney as well, of course, he has to navigate these troubled waters, but for the Conservatives, there is that little thing called the Alberta referendum, which I know you've heard of and wrote about, and I read you on this, and your colleague, Ms. Gerson. The thing is, it's this Alberta referendum story is Conservatives against Conservatives. There's nothing any Liberal cabinet minister or even the Prime Minister really can do to improve the situation, because it is a debate among the conservative family in Alberta, and how Conservatives across the country will react to this could have a national impact. And so I think this is, well, the Quebec election we'll get to at some point. I think it's still a big story. But when you consider if the federal Conservatives bungle this Alberta referendum story, it could cost them points in BC and in Ontario and Atlantic Canada, and suddenly we're back to a Liberal dominance that could last another term. So of course we don't get ahead of ourselves, but this is the story for now, for the summer. How will the Conservatives react to the Alberta referendum?
Well, you know what? Let's find out. Or maybe let's talk about it later, because I want to talk with you about Quebec. And you've mentioned Quebec here. Every couple of months, I check in with you on Quebec, because Quebec is interesting, but also sometimes bewildering and frightening. And you know, when we started recording and you had that all white background behind you and it looked like you were in the afterlife, that is not the most afraid I've been of a Quebecer even recently. You're a ghost. Okay, what I want to, let's not even talk about sovereignty. Let's just talk the upcoming provincial election. Yeah. What the hell is going on there? Because even compared to when we spoke last, it's gotten weirder and more confusing.
Yes, you are correct about that. And if you are wondering what the hell is going on in Quebec, you are not alone. Even us here covering this province right now, we are faced with 5 parties, and there's about 20 points separating first from 5th place in the polls. And, we could have, there was a column, I think, from La Presse last week. We could have like an Italian-like parliament, National Assembly, if the numbers don't change much until the election, which is scheduled on October 5th, strangely enough, 14 days before the Alberta referendum, but there's a link there at some point. But so the latest polls, we expect new polls coming in June. There will be a drop of polls before the summer break, because after Saint-Jean-Baptiste, after Fête Nationale, nobody listens to pollsters anymore. So this will be the big... So the Liberals are doing okay. They've risen back from the dead, but they are not dominant, and especially... Well, nobody's dominant, but they are still poor among Francophone voters outside of the Greater Montreal area. The Parti Québécois is leading, is still the favorite, should be considered a favorite, but they have tons of flaws. The party leader is not popular according to the polls, even though he's beloved by his base. The referendum promise from the Parti Québécois is a huge anchor for soft nationalist voters who are nationalists but don't want to separate necessarily. The CAQ, well... Okay, they have bounced back a little bit with the new premier, but there's it's still the same cabinet ministers. And the Quebec Conservatives are still a minor party, around polling in the mid-teens, and Québec Solidaire is not doing so well, except in a few spots on Montreal. So it's a complete mess. And I'll tell you this, Matt, there is no precedent in our lifetimes for a Quebec election or for any provincial election that looks like this. I tried to find a precedent, and there's nothing that looks like this. You could win the election, even a majority, maybe with 28 or 29% of the vote. It will be a strange one. I wish I had better things to tell you, but this is this landscape in Quebec right now.
I am already dreading the obnoxious emails I'm going to start getting from all the electoral reform people, because they're circling like buzzards, and
They will be disappointed. They will be disappointed, because the Parti Québécois has been clear on this. If there is to be electoral reform, PR, it will be in the country of Quebec, never in the province of Quebec. The PQ doesn't want to weaken the national government. So, they kind of admit right away the weakness of the system, but that's not for me to debate. So,
One of the things, and I'm glad you mentioned this already, there was that poll, I think it was last week. You were talking about the PQ having the anchor of the national question around them. There was a poll last week. My French isn't great. I always preface this, but I can read. Like I can, if I'm slow, I can kind of work my way through the newspapers. Polls are hard because of the technical language, but I can make do. And I was reading just last week that the actual issue of Quebec's separation, becoming its own country, is down. It's not only low historically, it's below its historical floor. Like it's, what was it, high 20s or something? Like less than a third. And meanwhile, the PQ, as you said, is leading. How do you have a party that is leading while also championing something a supermajority of the province doesn't want?
Well, many people, not just in Quebec, in Canada as well, vote against something. They don't vote for something. I think Pierre Poilievre discovered that many people were planning to vote against Justin Trudeau last year, right? And so when the PQ took the lead in the polls in 2023, it was mostly because, okay, who's best positioned to beat François Legault in the CEQ? Oh, it's the Parti Québécois? Okay. There's a PQ line that some PQ MNAs have used, is that if you don't want to separate, with us, you'll have the choice. We'll have a referendum, you can vote against, as if there's no consequences to a referendum, but that's another story. But when you look at the recent polls, we realize that the PQ really has hit a ceiling. It used to poll in the high 30s if you look in the fall, in the early winter. Now it's in the low 30s and sometimes high 20s. And it's mostly because of the referendum issue. The business community, and even among Francophones, the support for sovereignty is not above 50%. And so the sovereigntists in Quebec are definitely more motivated and enthusiastic, but they haven't been able to grow their base. If you look at the sovereignty polls from the early 2020s, when François Legault was super popular, sovereignty was around 30%, sometimes the odd 35%. You look today, it's 30%. It has not moved. And so it may be enough to win an election. It will be very hard to capture a majority, especially if non-sovereigntist voters go under one banner. Right now, they're spread around 3 banners. So,
when we take a look at kind of what I hate this, but the national question, that's the term that gets used. We look at sovereignty. You talk about not being able to grow the base. Who is the base? Like, what is the base for this in Quebec?
This was clearer a few years or even a decade ago. Now, when
That's
we look
why
at
I'm asking.
Yeah, when we look at the polls, we see that support for sovereignty is usually higher among men. It's higher among Francophones, naturally. It's higher among rural voters in Quebec City and in Montreal and Greater Montreal. The numbers are in the low 20s sometimes. But in the rural communities, it's much more popular. I think this is a similar trait in Alberta. We see also this in the rural communities. But even in the rural communities, we see that the support for the no side is usually higher than the yes side. And so I'm talking about, the bell curve, the generalizations of what a sovereigntist looks like. And again, I'm going to quote my now deceased father when we talked about politics. And he used to say, the problem in Quebec is that there are too many sovereigntists. And then he would wait for 2 seconds for drama. And he says, or too few. If there was enough of us, we would have a country. And if it was in polling in the 15, 16%, we would not have a problem. It would just be a nuisance. And now it's just in that 30% zone that you can't ignore it, but it's there. And of course, politicians of all stripes try to, there are some CEQ voters and MNAs that say, we would love Quebec to be an independent country, but it won't happen. So let's work through it, right? That's still a very important issue that will be a center focus in the Quebec election.
Obviously, I joke with this about with Jen Gerson, where I say, hey, me sitting comfortably in Toronto, I got to be real careful what I say, because if I say anything, it pisses everybody off. But one of the things, and so I'm saying this again carefully, one of the reasons I like the CAQ is because I could work with them. Like, there was an acknowledgement that we were going to disagree on some stuff, but there was also a pretty shared recognition of the reality. Everybody more or less agreed on the big picture, and therefore everybody was more or less there to work together. Sometimes you couldn't, because sometimes, the local, look, I've had Quebec politicians say to me with a smile, we agree with you, but if we say we agree with you, it's going to be unpopular. So we're going to tell you we disagree with you, and then in 2 years we'll do the thing. And I get it, but I still could work with that. I think your late father, God rest his soul, I think he had it exactly right. The absolute worst case scenario is when you have a critical mass of people who can be mobilized and whipped up, but not actually enough to do anything with it. And this is one of the things that Jen has been talking about a lot. She's not worried about, or I guess she is worried about the separatists winning. I don't want to say otherwise, but she's also worried about a 45-55 situation. Yeah. What do you do with that? Think this country has spent 31 years in the aftermath of the razor-thin 1995 vote. I don't want to do that again.
Well, listen, I'm not sure how I know how to answer this. I would say that the CEQ was a nice experiment. But it wouldn't, without talking about extremes in Quebec, because I don't think there are too many extremes, but the example of Macron in France, I think, is similar. It's okay, so you coalesce the center. You coalesce everything in the center to have one banner and one party. The problem is that you won't win forever. And if you take all the center and you win 2-3 terms maybe, at some point you're going to lose. And who you're going to lose to? To the extremes. Now, again, Quebec is not the extremes, but if you take people from the CEQ from all sides and then at some point you have to lose an election, what are you left with? You are left with the Parti Québécois, which is more motivated than ever. Or, the Quebec Liberals, they have their problems, but they have been doing well. And I think Charles Milliard, the new leader, still mostly unknown from Quebec voters. I think the strength right now is that they are recruiting quality candidates. Some of his policies, announcements have been a lot of people frowning. Does he want to lose? Weakening French protection? What are you talking about? But he has been able to attract quality candidates. And ultimately, I think, you win elections by winning seats. If you have a good recruitment strategy, perhaps it helps you. But I think we're going to have more than one Quebec election before the end of this decade. This is my little prediction here for your podcast.
So here, and again, I don't want to pull you into the politics because that's not what you do here, but you do look at the numbers. And I'm curious about this. If the national question is not popular, if this is something that other than kind of that highly motivated base is passionate about, what are the issues going to be in Quebec? And I'm kind of wondering, if no one wants to talk about separatism, what are these 5 parties actually going to spend the next few months fighting about?
If they're not talking about la question nationale, they're talking about issues that would resemble any other provincial election. Cost of living, education, healthcare, the deficits, how the CEQ has inherited surpluses from the previous Liberal government, and now we have historically high deficits with very little to show for it. That sounds like a provincial election. And this is what other parties will try to talk about. Madame Fréchette, the new premier, just announced last week that she was cutting Quebec provincial tax on the grocery items to help with the cost of living issues. And I'm no expert, but I kind of remember a prime minister on its way out trying to find a way to, let's cut the GST on chips and peanuts. And it was okay, so you're removing revenue from the government. We still need to fix schools and hospitals, but you're doing that 3 months before an election or 4 months before an election. I don't know. At some point, any government runs out of ideas, right? And this is what we're seeing from the CEQ right now. I will follow the numbers. Perhaps Madame Fréchette, she has a little charm to her. Perhaps she is a breath of fresh air compared to François Legault. Perhaps she'll be able to carry that momentum until October.
Yeah, it's funny. We only got a couple minutes left here because you've got another one of these coming up at the bottom of the hour. But I did want to mention Premier Frechette did have a bit of a bounce. Like obviously
Yep.
there was some Legault drag there. Like him being gone helped.
Yep.
Wasn't a miracle. Like you said before, you rise from the dead. We're not looking at a Lazarus situation, but at the very least, the patient might not be in critical condition anymore. They're in serious condition. Talking about the provincial issues looking very similar, though, I had a conservative friend of mine, a federal conservative, who was part of the group that looked at their polling numbers. One of the things he pointed out to me years ago is that Quebec, if you polled Quebecers and Canadians in every other province, most of the provinces looked the same and Quebec looked different. Less and less. Quebec is actually starting to actually look and behave like a pretty normal Canadian province, except it does it en français.
Exactly. That's true. And I know some Quebecers will hear me say this and you say this and will cringe, but you look at the numbers and just for instance, if you look at the Quebec City region, and you know Quebec City, the surroundings are very conservative, and the downtowns, the small ridings on the map are liberal. This is what other Canadian cities look like. Right. The exception would be Montreal, where the Bloc Québécois was popular in the suburbs. But, and even the Bloc Québécois, I mean, if you look at the sovereignty movement in Quebec, led by M. Plamondon of the PQ, they have veered, I don't want to say they're right wing, but they're not left wing anymore. They used to be. And they are trying to capture the median voter in Quebec, which is far more centrist than it used to be. This is what a centrist party does, right? It looks where the electorate is moving, and they try to move to nudge it a bit on its side. Quebec is en français, as you say. The ecosystem of culture and values and movies and TV shows are completely different from the rest of Canada. But the politics is, when you translate it to another language, it's kind of similar.
Everybody wants good hospitals, good schools, safe streets.
And I'll get in trouble for that. I know I will get in trouble for that.
Well, you know what? Just blame it on me. I'm the guy from Toronto. So, I'll take the heat for you. But no,
all right.
Look, the numbers are what they are. All right. I don't want to get you in more trouble. So you've got another meeting. I'm going to get you out of this so that you can go do it. But I'm going to, have a great summer. Like, that's the first thing I want to tell you. Closer to the election, I'll check in with you again. Let's see where we are in the fall. Let's see how things look.
Absolutely. Merci beaucoup, Matt. Much appreciated. Take care.
You're very welcome. All right. Take care. Thanks, buddy. That was my buddy, PJ Fournier. The nationalists can blame me. I led him there. I made him do it. It's my fault. Check him out, 338canada.com and 338canada.ca. We'll check in with him again before the Quebec election in the fall. Right now, though, David Shipley, CEO of Beauceron, a cybersecurity company, will be joining me next. We're going to talk AI development, what is hype and what is real. We're going to talk Facebook, YouTube, algorithms, and fraud. He's actually testifying before Parliament right after we finished recording, so I had to get him off to that so we could go talk to the really fancy people who are not just wearing their Gap t-shirts as they interview him. Lots coming up from Dave. Stick around. He will be joining me right after this. This episode of On the Line is also brought to you by the Forest Products Association of Canada. A stronger forest industry starts with predictability. Mill modernization, bioenergy, mass timber, and advanced biomaterials all depend on reliable access to usable Canadian wood fiber, workable timelines, and clear rules. Provinces lead forest management, and the federal role should be coordinated, complementary, and focused on results. Every unnecessary delay makes it harder to keep jobs and attract investment. For a sector rooted in communities, regulatory efficiency is economic policy. Learn more at fpac.ca. Always a pleasure to have David Shipley here from Beauceron Security, cybersecurity expert, CEO there, one of our go-tos here at the line. So we got a couple topics we got to plow through today. We got to do it pretty quickly because you and I both have other appointments. We're going to talk about what you're doing later today in a little bit. But right now, I want to ask you a question. So I use AI a lot. I don't use it for writing, and I think it's important that a writer say that. I've actually, even when I've fooled around with it a little bit, I didn't think it was very good at it. But I use it for things like proofreading, for research, for summaries, and a huge thing that is helpful in my line of work is feeding it an audio file and saying, transcribe this. And that has been a huge time saver in my line of work. So I do like AI. I also know it's annoying. It has a lot of dumb quirks. And it gets really basic stuff wrong. But I use it enough to see that the capabilities of it are growing by leaps and bounds. It is much better than it was a year ago, and it is almost infinitely better than it was 2 years ago. And I don't think anyone was using it 3 years ago, at least not in the broader public. So there was a statement, David, a couple of days ago from Anthropic, the company that does Cloud, one of the AIs, that basically said we need to have some sort of coordinated effort to slow this stuff down because it's starting to show signs that it could escape our control. You were a little skeptical of that, though. Tell me why. What do you think Anthropic might actually be doing there?
I'm massively skeptical. In fact, Anthropic's probably greatest innovation this year is their masterful manipulation of the public consciousness and marketing of their platform ahead of their initial public offering. So, back in late March, they leak, we've got some super scary, super hacking model, and, it's going to be terrifying. And Matt, I have never seen Canadian regulators this terrified since 2008 and the banking crisis. And so all of a sudden, everyone thought everyone's getting hacked instantaneously everywhere. Turned out a little bit more nuanced than that, a little bit more complicated. And the problem is far deeper than about just AI finding software vulnerabilities. And now, of course, they're bringing this forward. And there are two particular cynical takes I have when the big tech AI companies do this. First, it's marketing. So they're pumping up the stock. And they did this before when they were in their AI doomers phase that we're all going to be out of a job because of AI. And that turned out to sour Gen Z and millennials. And good on you for booing every commencement speaker in the United States that brought up AI, except for the Daily Show host who said we should go kill AI, who got a standing ovation. Because, Matt, the kids are pissed. They're 15% unemployment and they are not enjoying the AI doomers. So magically, they're having to roll back that line. And now, they're saying it's all this software vulnerability, et cetera, it's a different problem. It's not because AI is super good at finding vulnerabilities. It's software makers have never been liable for the crap they have put out into the world. And turns out there's a lot of crap to find that doesn't require a particular amount of brilliance. So no, it's overhype, and it is designed to keep policymakers in FOMO. Oh my God, we got to make sure we've got a national AI strategy and we get every small business on this. And meanwhile, there's a small but growing resistance of folks like myself. And I use AI tools. I use it to help with drafting of things, editing, exactly the way you describe it. But I'm also really worried about what AI does to the human brain.
Okay. You give me a lot to respond to there. So let me try to knock off a couple of quick points. First of all, I'm with you on the brain rotting 100%. I do think to an extent it's in how you use it. AI has helped me learn Spanish. So like actually having something I could talk to that tracked my level and was constantly pushing me up a little bit was incredibly useful. That was a brain enhancing way. But yeah, absolutely. It can rot brains. I think that's been true. And I'm not trying to shoot you down here, but I mean, haven't we been talking about that since like the first like Ataris and Nintendos? Like, isn't every technology comes out, it's like, wow, look what it's doing to our brains. And look at human history. I'm not convinced we're wrong. I'm just saying I don't think it's limited to AI.
No, but it's different than because oftentimes I get the arguments from the AI bros that, well, the calculator did the same thing, David. And here's the difference. You didn't outsource critical thinking and reasoning to the calculator. It helped you do a step in a mathematical computation. You still had to do reasoning. Here's the studies that keep my brain racing at night. So MIT Media Lab put EEG scanners on people's heads and then had them write essays with ChatGPT, with a search engine, with the brain only. Brain only group had 100% brain activity. The ChatGPT group had 55% less brain activity. So it's like it's a proven fact. Here's the interesting thing. Asked afterwards to recite a single line from the ChatGPT essay, and 18 participants couldn't remember a single line. They didn't do it, so they didn't remember it. And then what was scary is in the fourth experiment where they had to use their own brains to still write, there were still elements where they were seeing decreased activity compared to the group that had been brain only until this. Now, to your point, there's also really good studies that show if we use AI as a coach, we don't let it be the doer, that we actually can see 127% improvement in practice tests and no decline in the real exams when they don't have the AI with them. So there are ways to use this to augment and help humans. It's that the tech companies, Matt, they actually want to dumb us down. And Sam Altman, who's radically transparent in some of his like James Bond-esque Machiavellian evil, one of their billing models is that we want to put a meter on intelligence. So you're buying intelligence units. Well, okay, how do you increase the value of your somewhat garbage AI? Make sure that the general human intelligence sinks. So, you corner the market on smarts, which I think is problematic.
I don't disagree with you, but I would say, and I mean, look, in a perfect world, everybody would just be reading the collected works of Shakespeare all the time and we'd have no problems, or going through all the great works of Western civilization history. But I occasionally find my teenager talking to ChatGPT, and in a weird way, I feel better about that than her spending all her time on TikTok and Instagram learning that her perfectly normal body size isn't perfect enough. And I think the big picture I've got here, and I'm with you. Like, I hear what you're saying, and again, like, I keep shoving Encyclopedia Britannica, a hard copy, at her, and she hasn't shown any interest yet. But overall, I have been alarmed where we've gone with digital technology for 10, maybe 15 years. Like, at first, I was having a great time. It was amazing. And then I started to look around and realize people around me were getting kind of stupid. And I didn't think that was me getting more arrogant. I thought something else might have been going on. And, we're going to talk about this in a moment. But, just looking at what Facebook and YouTube and other algorithm-derived platforms like that have done to people I know, it's pretty terrifying.
Well, the Social Dilemma did a great job, that Netflix documentary, of explaining that these folks have precisely engineered dopamine delivery mechanisms to keep us hooked, addicted, seeing their ads. And it turns out that, up to 15 billion of these ads per day are fraud. So they have built a cash machine that actually doesn't just cost our attention economy, doesn't just pit everyday Canadians at our own throats, doesn't just, now we found out from a CBC report this weekend, have international actors portraying themselves as Albertans fraudulently, and then getting paid for the influence they're deriving because they are getting us pissed off and riled up, which is the exact same garbage we saw during the trucker convoy. The interesting thing is there were foreign elements involved in the trucker convoy social media presences. There were massive Facebook groups created. The funny part was it was less FSB Russian hilarity and more Vietnamese t-shirt maker going, I would rather burn your democracy down so I can move some merch. And, that's where we're at right now. And meanwhile, Facebook sits atop of the entire garbage pile, making unholy amounts of money.
Let's talk about that for a minute. I do want to circle back a bit. Let's put a pin on the Facebook thing just for a minute. I want to make one more point on AI, and then we'll tie a ribbon around it and we'll move on. Sure. One of the things I'm torn on, and you're presenting a more skeptical perspective, Dave. Like, you're actually saying, well, some of it's, marketing, it's hype, it's driving up prices before the IPO, et cetera, et cetera. I get that. Like, I am more than cynical enough to understand that. But also, as a regular user of this stuff, I am also observing rapid capability increases. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to get into a philosophical discussion. Two bald guys on a podcast are not going to determine like the perfect theological meaning of what is sentience. Like, that's not up to you and I. I'm going to, I see the Pope has weighed in on it. I'm not even Catholic, but I'm okay with that. I'm like, you know what, Your Holiness, I'm going to let you run that ball. I'm going to do my thing. You do yours. I'm very comfortable with that division of labor. I'll do this. The Pope can do the other stuff. But I don't think it's surprising or wrong to see the Pope and other theologians and philosophers and ethicists weighing in on this stuff. I have seen capability leaps on this stuff where I've become pretty convinced if it had persistent memory, and right now it doesn't. Like, AIs forget stuff. If you ask it like 15 questions in a row, kind of by the 15th, it's forgotten the first one. And sometimes that creates weird scenarios where you get rapidly diverging answers to the exact same question. But if we could solve the persistent memory issue, I think we would be in a pretty awkward philosophical place of trying to figure out what life actually is and what sentience is. And when someone tells me this stuff could be getting to a point where it could start to act autonomously and maliciously, we've already seen some early versions of this. I do get a little bit nervous here because you and I have talked about this a lot. Human beings are not good about putting boxes around the problems before the problems explode.
So as I often do in our relationship, because I think we've been talking for 10 plus years now, in various incarnations in media, I'm going to affirm what you just said and then, make it real and frightening. So this whole issue of mythos, this AI that hacks software autonomously, they gave it persistent memory. They gave it a scratch pad so we could follow actions through. So Matt, yes. I don't believe that necessarily Matt's sentience, but I'm going to defer like you to the Pope, and there is a secularist who's got an equally powerful and an almost eerily compelling argument to the Pope's recent encyclical, which is a really good read, actually, not Catholics and non-Catholics. But here's where I want to move beyond the AI doom hype cycle, because AI played a role in killing Canadians, and we have forgotten that conversation in this country. And Tumbler Ridge. We do not know what ChatGPT told the killer in Tumbler Ridge. We have never seen the transcripts. It's bad enough that the company's CEO apologized. It's bad enough that the minister of ISED hauled them in and gave them a stern accountability waving, finger waving Canadian style. And there were 2 lawsuits. And there's supposedly an RCMP, possibly criminal investigation. There's going to be a coroner's inquest, et cetera, et cetera. Why have we not seen the chat transcript? Matt, release the files. How can we have a conversation about a national AI strategy that's supposed to talk about safety when the one case where this thing played some kind of a role in actively killing Canadians in one of the worst school shootings in this country's history, and we don't know what it said? What we do know it said in other cases that are being decided before the U.S. courts is it's actively incited violence. It has encouraged people to take their own lives. It has played a horrific role in real crimes. But we're distracted in this country. We are so distracted at the federal stage where right now it's like we need to juice the economy and we need to make our businesses dependent on AI. And we'll get to that safety stuff later. Well, I can tell you what later looks like. I fought for 4 years to get a basic critical cybersecurity infrastructure bill passed, and it finally passed last Thursday night in the Senate. We don't have 4 years to figure out, because my question to politicians, to all of us, is how many dead kids?
Oh, a lot. A lot more.
And frankly, I turn to Canadians and go, if you're going to wave your finger at the Americans and the issue about gun violence in schools, and you're going to do nothing about the way that AI is going to accelerate violence in our own society here, like, thanks, but no thanks. I don't want to hear the conversation.
We're running into I do want to pivot the conversation here, but we are running into a problem here that it's bigger than AI. Like, I don't think what you're identifying here is an AI specific problem or a digital security problem. What you're identifying here is a Canadian problem, because, we never got to find out what we spent on COVID vaccines because it was commercially sensitive information. I spent, just almost out of morbid curiosity, a couple of weeks ago in Toronto, the Line 5 Eglinton, the transit line went down for almost a full day. And I began filing media requests just to figure out why. And I wasn't even planning on writing about it. What I was planning on writing about one day is how hard it is to get basic information from agencies. And I never got it. Why did the LRT break? Dear Matt, we are committed to providing excellent LRT service. Hey, thank you so much for that. Why did it break? Dear Matt, the line was not operational for the period between hours X and Y. Thank you for your interest. Hey, great. Thank you so much for that. Could you tell me what happened with the line? Dear Matt, this government is committed to building out transit for Canadians. And it's just on and on and on and on and on. And I never got an answer. So you say release the transcripts. No, we don't do that in this country. It's uncouth. It's impolite. We would never even ask for them. And you should be ashamed of yourself for suggesting we should. How dare you?
I think every Canadian reporter still out there, and you know that I was a reporter for Time, needs to take a look in the mirror immediately and demand those files. If you're going to have every single story we talk about AI safety in this country until those transcripts released should reference the fact that we still don't know what an AI did in the exact role it played in inciting actual violence against humans. And, that's the only way the only way you get accountability to the Canadian government, the rare times that you do it is when it's like Bart and Lisa Simpson's in the Camp Krusty episode where they harass Homer. I want to go to Camp Krusty. I want to go to Camp Krusty. And like, I'm just at that point. I want the files. I want the files. I want the files, Mr. Carney. Let's see the files.
I can't even get Toronto to tell me why the train broke.
And I leave it to you and Jen to have the much needed and constant Canadian accountability conversation. But the speed at which digital life is coming at Canadians does not reconcile with what an MP told me once when I was talking about critical life-saving systems. And after the parliamentary testimony I gave, he's like, "Well, Mr. Shipley, Parliament moves at the speed of Parliament." And I'm like,
"Yeah,
life doesn't care." Like, I feel like Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park. Like, come on,
life finds a way.
Life finds a way. And so, it's frustrating. And for some reason, like hilariously, I've testified, this will be my 5th Senate or House of Commons committee testimony in 3 months on cyber issues. So I'm yelling right at the right people. I'm feeling like an Old Testament prophet still, but at least I've moved from media pundit to, at least I'll say it to their faces every time they call me. But the needle takes 4 years to move and the body count keeps rising.
Yeah. So we've got Dave here wandering the mountains talking with God, and my AI is talking to everybody else, and Parliament's talking to no one.
So, well, and the ultimate irony is Meta is probably one of the biggest pushers of AI, and they are cleaning up after a biblical mess. So they put a chatbot in charge of your account security and resetting passwords, and people just asked it nicely to take over people's accounts. And this high-speed idiot, which is what it is, which is perfectly susceptible to social engineering, compromised 20,000 accounts so far.
Yeah.
And this is the autonomous AI people want to put into walking robots that I was in South Korea, and they're going to put into a giant excavator, which Matt looked terrifyingly like a hunter killer from the Terminator movies. I'm like, guys, this is a bad idea. So fun.
Year or two ago, we only got about 5 minutes left here. We got to talk about your testimony, but a year or two ago, I was at a bar with some buddies. We ordered a round of beers. And a couple minutes later, a robot pulled up to our table and delivered them. And I remember thinking at the time, this was really cool. And also, we're doomed. So that's kind of where I came down on that one. All right, we got about 5 minutes here, and then we both got to bail. So you are testifying today. What are you testifying about? Where are you testifying, and what are you testifying about?
So I'm in Ottawa testifying in person. It's my second time back in 2 weeks. I was asked to speak on the new national anti-fraud strategy. And one of my biggest concerns, Matt, is that we do the dumb thing that the British did in their national anti-fraud strategy, which is look at it, the easy target, which is the banks, which no one has any great love for, but yet all of our pension funds depend on desperately, and says, well, you're just liable, just make it right. And all that will do is create a fraud tax. And that will mean all of us who service charge and interest rates are just paying and paying and paying and paying. Great. That's going to end very poorly for us. So what I'm saying is we need to start at the top of the scam funnel, which is Meta, which on Sunday, Lloyds Bank in the UK said 2/3 of all of their consumer fraud cases start on a Meta-owned platform. So it's going to be intense because I'm going to be on one end of the panel and Meta's going to be on the other, and we'll see where the chips fall.
Tell me about one of these fraud cases. When you talk about fraud, what do they look like? Like, just give me a very basic example here, because I know what, like, banking fraud or mortgage fraud or securities fraud looks like, but what does a meta-derived fraud look like?
Yeah, so we've got a story coming out of the Aurelia Matters newspaper, and it was published on June 5th. And let me just bring up the salient details because it's your typical senior loses an ungodly amount of money. And this is a cryptocurrency investment fraud. So this individual was defrauded by a Facebook ad that featured an AI-generated deepfake video of the prime minister urging people to invest $350 into a cryptocurrency scheme, and she lost $1 million. And this is one of multiple Canadians who have lost their entire life savings. But it can be much smaller. It can be Facebook Marketplace scams, but a lot of times it's romance scams, trying to build relationships, or it's cryptocurrency. It's usually crypto when it's big losses like this, which is a whole other conversation. And super excited that there's a new documentary coming out called Everybody's Lying to You for Money. The guy from the OC, Ben McKenzie, has been going around North America showing it, and yeah, it's part of the problem too. But Meta sits atop, and I referenced before, Reuters did a story in November 2025, and they showed that Facebook's own internal documents estimated that they made $16 billion in 1 year selling scam ads and knowingly banned goods as ads, and that won the Pulitzer Prize, and they're now being sued in the United States by multiple groups because of the sheer amount of fraud. In case you're wondering, 1 in $10 they made that year came from fraud or banned goods, according to their own internal documents.
Now we're down to about 2 minutes, but you referenced something already. You mentioned the convoy back in 2022, where there were a ton of people who were engaged on it purely to make money. They were selling merchandise. They were pumping hashtags and memes to generate lists of people who had been identified as being, first of all, could be mobilized. Second, had a definable ideology. All those people who interact with that content got put into a list, are now being given other content. Absolutely, some of this stuff has flowed all the way through to the current referendum debate in Alberta. A lot of the Facebook groups that are mobilizing those people, a lot of the Reddit communities, those all originated during the convoy, or at least exploded during the convoy. A report out this week, we only got a couple of minutes to talk about it. I'll turn the floor over to you. Canadian investigators tracked where some of the most active personalities on pro-separatism Facebook groups are. And they're basically bot farms in, I think it was Vietnam, Thailand?
So CBC's got a story out this morning. Their investigates group says the 14 accounts from India, Pakistan, Indonesia posting on popular Alberta separatist groups. And the headline is, wow, Facebook is paying people overseas promoting Alberta separatism. And so we've seen this movie before. They either create fake accounts or hijack fake accounts and accelerate this kind of discord, oftentimes to sell merch. So a lot of those, F. Trudeau products were all designed on that side to promote things. And but also they get paid by Meta for engagement. So this is quite a damning story. There's lots of receipts that are posted on here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this is going to be an issue. And I have my own feelings about this entire issue. I believe in a unified, united Canada. I'm a nationalist. I'm a federalist. But I don't think any of either side wants Facebook tipping the scales.
Yeah.
And if we're going to have this conversation, such as it is, it shouldn't be Facebook getting to decide how much of that conversation we see and hear.
In the same way that my children have mandatory sex education, I wish everyone over the age of 40 had mandatory cyber education, just to understand how algorithms work, how this stuff is weaponized. And before I get bullshit complaints about this, Dave, I want to make very clear, you and I are not saying that Alberta separatism is not being generated on the grassroots by Albertans. It absolutely is. There are legitimate grievances that real people are angry about. But when it moves into the online space, it becomes exploitable and it can be amplified. And that's what is happening. And it happens with every single issue that exists. And on that note,
Yeah.
Finish up, and then I got to go, and you got to go.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, we need to hear authentic Albertan voices. That's the point. This is the time as a country we need to hear from Albertans the most.
Yeah.
And certainly as an Eastern Canadian, I don't want to join the long list of folks that are trying to tell Alberta what to do. I care and I really want Alberta to stay. But I want to hear from Albertans who want to stay. And I want to hear the genuine problems that Albertans have that's motivating them to want to leave. But I don't want these clowns influencing it.
David Shipley, the man from Atlantic, Canada, now in Ottawa, agreeing with the man from Toronto in Toronto who says, Alberta, this is up to you guys, but let's make sure it's actually Albertans talking to Albertans.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for the
buddy.
opportunity.
Yeah, have a good luck today testifying. You take good care, man.
You too. Cheers.
This episode of On the Line was also brought to you by Cameco Corporation. In nuclear energy, timelines and costs matter. Incomplete designs carry real risk of delays and cost overruns. That's why the AP1000 reactor is the right choice for Canada. It is already operating today and ready now to deliver the power we need with 100% Canadian ownership and strong participation from Canadian suppliers. If we are serious about building Canada and powering it on time and on budget, the choice is clear. The AP1000 reactor is the only option that delivers. To learn more, visit ap1000.cameco.com. That was David Shipley, CEO of Beauceron Security, one of my go-tos on all cybersecurity-related issues. As cheerful as always. Yeah, he thinks I'm going to get the Tumbler Ridge documents. I don't even know why the LRT in the concrete tube under my house didn't run for a day a few weeks ago. Everything's fine. www.readtheline.ca. Check us out there. Like and subscribe as always. Whatever app you were listening to this on or watching it, please leave us a thumbs up or a nice comment. It really does help. We will be back with you on Friday with another episode of the Line Podcast. But for now, this has been On the Line. Like and subscribe.